So today, I would like to welcome Frank Rieck with the Automotive Center of Expertise in the Netherlands. They conduct research and education with the automotive industry to promote smart and green solutions. So ACE is a close partner of CalSTART and Drive to Zero. We have a collaboration agreement to support the expansion of zero-emission commercial vehicles in Europe. And as you know, Europe is one of the leading markets for zero-emission commercial vehicles because of its commitments to climate action and issues of air pollution. And some countries, such as the Netherlands, are moving even faster. So Frank is going to be talking about who ACE is, why the Netherlands is the beachhead market, what's happening in Europe today, and what they're doing together with the Drive to Zero. So Frank, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Cristiano. We are very happy to inform you of what we are doing in Europe for the CalSTART Commercial Vehicle Drive to Zero project. And I will show some of the background where we come from and where we are heading to. A stands for the Automotive Center of Expertise. It's a collaboration between over 20 automotive companies, institutions and governmental bodies, together with 3 universities of applied science that have an automotive education. So we are very close to the market, especially Dutch market, but we also embarked on international corporations like yours, but also in Europe. So I'll give you the short update. First of all, your project is in the heart of our R&D team. We have 3 topics for the automotive future: energy transition and smart mobility. And the CalSTART Drive to Zero, if you say it short, is a part of the energy transition of our research and development work. And what's our team doing? Why do we start with renewable energy? Because it makes the difference for electric driving. In Europe, there are many countries, and those countries have a different situation about their energy supply. For instance, Poland has a lot of coal-fired utilities still, is on its way on renewable energy, but it's not there. While Sweden and Norway are on the other side, have a lot of hydropower and renewables. The Netherlands is more or less in the middle, and it makes a difference for electric vehicle if you start calculating well-to-wheel CO2 emissions. On average, in Europe, we can save 2/3 of the CO2 emission and the energy if we start to drive electrically, also with trucks, buses, harbor vehicles in the commercial side. The Netherlands is very ambitious in its electrification, even so ambitious that it's probably one of the world front runners. If you look at the world average, you see that on the picture of Bloomberg, then they say maybe in 2040 it will be electric vehicles will be 54% of the sales. In the Netherlands, we decided that in 2030 it should be 100% of the sales. And also the target in 2025 is 50%. And that's a target that is fixed now. The way how we do it is still under debate. And on the other side, we are already leading in the world in the charging infrastructure. It's maybe small, but on the right side, you see that Europe has about 175,000 charging points, chargers. And of that, 75,000 are in the Netherlands. So that's a large portion of it. And we calculated a few years ago that of the 10 charging poles in the world, there is one in the Netherlands. So we have 10%, and still this figure will be less at this moment in time, because the rest of the world is also starting to build a charging infrastructure. But in the Netherlands, we were very early, and we are quite advanced in that. Another area where we are leading, at least in Europe, is in the e-buses and in the e-trucks. Those are buses you use in the city for transfer buses, I think you call them, and they are more or less standard now in the European, in the Netherlands cities. Of the whole European fleet, that's near 4,000 buses, about, and thousands are driving now in the Netherlands. So that's 1/4. And as a market penetration, this is already 15% of the buses is electrified, and probably at the end of this year it will be 20. The same situation is more or less with the e-trucks, especially the trucks for city distribution. The majority of those e-trucks is driving in the Netherlands. It's now approaching 150 trucks, and Europe-wide it's approaching 300. So you can say half of it is driving in the Netherlands. We don't hope this picture stays like this. Of course, the other countries will pick up this also. And there are, of course, other commercial vehicles, drive to zero, to be found in the Netherlands. It can be shuttles, passenger shuttles, or cargo shuttles like AGVs, or harbor handling equipment that's also electrified, trucks again, and towers, cargo towers in the harbor. And of course the vans that are used quite extensively now in the cities, electric vans. It's a growing market. We're not leading there. That's also happening in other countries, but it's also a commercial vehicle now, point of view. The European Union has some targets, and it are strict targets now for 2025 and 2030, and that is that CO2 reduction should be 20% at least and 35% at least in these years. However, we are lagging behind if you looked at worldwide. Other regions in the world had already targets before, not always that strict like India and Japan, but for instance China and the US have already decided on stricter targets. You can imagine that those targets could be at risk due to COVID-19, but what we see in the market now is that the total vehicle sales is down to a historic low level, but the EV sales are quite resilient. It's even so that in Germany the sales of plug-in hybrid and battery EVs increased by 33%. And in some countries it's a little bit less than last year, but it's still much better than the fossil fuel vehicles. So it's more or less the same the situation as in the financial crisis. Also there, the electric vehicles and the electrified vehicles did better than the traditional vehicles. The problem is in the production because the supply chains are disturbed. The EU announced a restructural plan for after COVID with big investments. And this plan is a Green Deal, as we call it. That means that that we want to rebuild the economy in the right sustainable way. And for EVs, 80 billion euros is now mentioned for the EV development, sales and infrastructure build. Next to that, and especially for the transportation side, there was already an agreement that in 2023 we would have Europe-wide road pricing for transport based on CO2 emission per kilometer. So you can say through that system you have to pay directly if you want to drive, and if you have an electric truck or a low emission truck, you get a rebate directly or even a bonus. This system is already introduced in Switzerland and Germany, and it works remarkably well because it's directly going in the TCO of the transport organizations. Sorry. One of the things that are a challenge is, will there be enough e-trucks? You mentioned already that there are enough models, but there are not enough competing firms to deliver those e-trucks. And you see here the picture of Europe, more or less. I saw that in your overview there were some other players also from the US. Of course, we have Tesla and Nikola here. But furthermore, it's apart from BYD, it's European manufacturers. But the numbers are small, and the variety of models is also still quite small. And it's not only the trucks, it's also the charging infrastructure dedicated for trucks. You cannot always use the charging infrastructure for passenger cars. And as an example, a good example in California, we also need charging corridors on the important transport routes. Those projects are defined and we are working on it, but it's still not there. And we have some good companies that can deliver on that, like Fastnet, who is the specialist in fast charging in the Netherlands, and also has some charging places now for trucks, as you can see on the picture. And other good news from Europe is that we do not leave all the battery production at Asia, but we have to build a battery production ourselves too for EV batteries. That's crucial for the supply chains and the security of that supply. Also a thing we learned from COVID, I think. And the last years, this is really accelerating this capacity that we are building to produce lithium-ion batteries for EVs, including trucks, buses, and harbor equipment. That brings me to the cooperation with Karlstad. We like your tools very much that you already have in the US. But if you look at those tools, they are very much focused on the situation in US. So we decided to copy that more or less, but use the same kind of tools for the policies and action toolkit, the zero emission technology inventory, and the total cost of ownership and the ZETI analytics. And I also heard that you have in preparation a toolkit for the charging infrastructure, and you can imagine that we are very happy with that because we have a lot of experience there. We also have, for instance, a total cost of ownership calculator, but it's in Dutch and it's only for buses. And we think that your version is much more universal, and we can make a European version of that. And that will also help to speed up the transition to zero emission and low emission vehicles, commercial vehicles. And last but not least, we already have a long-lasting cooperation with the United States over electric vehicles. Nikola Tesla, he was not born in the US, but in Europe, but he was the inventor of the alternating current, and the electric motor, the modern electric motor. But before his time, there was a professor in the Netherlands, Sibratus Strating, and he made an electric-powered vehicle scale model. And it worked, but it never scaled up, and he never knew that that later would be a car. So there is already a working relation in history, and we want to build on that. And thank you for listening to this presentation, and I'm welcome to answer questions about it. Thank you.
So Frank, thank you very much for highlighting the progress that the Netherlands is achieving towards zero-emission commercial vehicles and for being a Drive to Zero partner.